welcome back to Fat and Angry. He's fat and I'm angry, recording in Corpus Christi. That's right, Corpus Christi, the bleached anus of of the coastal cities. Remember, it may be shiny and white, but it's still a shithole. Today we're going to talk to you about horror movies, in particular one franchise. And we're going to talk about this one because we just both picked up a box set containing the entire franchise. That franchise is Phantasm.
One of my personal favorites.
It is a classic, definitely. I remember, what was your first experience with Phantasm?
Well, as I mentioned, when I was younger and initially started collecting horror movies, I just bought up whatever the hell I could get my hands on. And it was one of the movies I happened to pick up. And I bought the first one, and I was really impressed with it. And then I had a chance to rent the second one, and my mind was fucking blown. So I managed to get a hold of that one eventually, and spent a very, very long time trying to get part 3. I ended up managing to get part 4 at some point, and I've had a burnt copy of the third one, but now they've managed to finish the 5th film, and they made a box set containing all 5, so we bought the sets.
Yeah, we happened to stumble across them on a trip over to Walmart. And Fats here saw it, and I'm looking at it, and I noticed that the quality of the box set wasn't exactly great. Just a regular, like, clamshell DVD case. So it's not like a custom box set. It's not like in a tin or like a metal case, and it wasn't like one of those big fucking fancy ones. So I'm thinking, oh well, I wonder how much this costs. So I take it down and go get price check, expecting the guy to say like 30, 40, or even more. $14.96. I'm like, well, can't say no to that. Now I have an anniversary edition of the first one, but one I've been wanting to get is the second one. My first experience with Phantasm came back in the old days, back in the late 80s, early 90s. The days of cable television, back when that was really kicking ass and taking names. And back in those days, during the weekend, there was 2 special shows that you'd watch, or like program blocks, I guess you'd call them nowadays. They were USA's Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried, and the other one, and one that lasted much longer, one of my personal favorites, Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs. Now, those of you who are familiar with James Rolfe and the Angry Video Game Nerd, and check out his Cinemassacre channel. I'm not plugging him or anything. The guy has like millions of subscribers. But that said, he is a big fan of Monster Vision too. Now, he mentions that he liked Monster Vision preferably in the 80s, where it was like black and white. They played a lot of the Universal Monster movies, a lot of the old classic stuff, and like their bumpers used to be like a spooky kind of like narrator, like, you know, introducing the movies, and every so often they'd have like a guest star show up to introduce and do bumpers. Like Penn and Teller would show up as like night security guards every so often to like introduce some of the movies sometimes. When Joe Bob Briggs came along, they kind of focused more on the 80s slasher genre. So rather than seeing like Dracula and the Wolfman and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you started seeing things like Child's Play, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. This was my first introduction to Phantasm. I caught it on one of those days. And yeah, it was pretty interesting. Not a lot of movies like it for its time. I mean, granted, it's a slasher flick, but it's not the typical kind of slasher flick, that's to say the least. What do you think sets it apart from its competition?
Well, unlike somebody like Jason or Myers, who just basically comes after the victims and tears them apart, there's quite a bit of either supernatural or sci-fi element to it. The tall man doesn't just tear people apart. He utilizes what I believe they refer to as sentinels, but not until part 4. They're these silver orbs that have different functions, but usually some sort of bladed element. The first kill you see, a set of prongs comes out to the front
The two pissed off forks.
Yes. And it drives into this one guy's head, and a drill comes out the center of him, boring into his brain. Then the back end of the orb opens up, spraying all the blood and chunks out. And in the newer versions, they've actually enhanced this effect, but you can see it if you look closely on the original. When the guy falls over dead, he ends up pissing his pants. Now, they had to kind of blur it out in the original to keep it from getting a higher rating. But in the later versions, because it's not as big of a deal, they went ahead and took the color filters off, and you can legitimately see him just pissing himself as his brain gets gored out.
Now, those of you who've never seen Phantasm, for one, get off your ass. Two, the story essentially revolves around a funeral home, which is something I'm very familiar with. The basic premise is that you have a kid who's upset because, like, his brother died, his older brother died, I think it was?
Yes.
And it's like, granted, I have the original on DVD, it's the collector's edition, but I haven't watched it in a while, so. Fats here remembers a lot better than I do. It's like, I remember, like, the PowerPoint presentations of the movie, kind of.
Well,
like the important bits and, like, the main things that, like, stick out in your head.
Yeah, he's essentially his older brother dies, and he's not quite sure how to deal with it. Like, rather than go to the funeral with everyone else, he kind of watches it from afar, but also in snooping around the cemetery and then the funeral home to just kind of be an outcast while he's looking outside in, he ends up finding out that what's going on in the funeral home is kind of unusual. And
yeah, for one thing, he comes across the tall man, who is played by the actor Angus Scrimm. And I love how they did him up. For one thing, he has like one eye kind of like always squinting, and he usually has like the other eye with like the eyebrow raised, so his face kind of looks unnaturally lopsided. He doesn't have an actual name throughout many of the movies until they go by his original name when they finally go into the background of the character. And but in the movies, in the credits, he's referred to as the Tall Man. Not exactly one of the best known like villains of the '80s in terms of the horror genre, but no less important. If anything, he's more creepy than villains like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees, because you can't just expect him to just come after you. Is you never know what he's up to. He's like a creeping menace, like almost like an H.P. Lovecraft villain.
yeah,
When you think about it.
actually, like in a lot of the later movies in particular, the main characters are hunting after the tall man, and it seems like a lot of the traps that he sets for him aren't meant to kill, but to just psychologically fuck with people. Like, in particular, Reggie, he ends up having sex with all kinds of women throughout the series, and they always end up being like some sort of zombie girl, or they have like these sentinels like hidden inside their body and come to face him earlier. And so, like, every time he gets laid on the road, he ends up having to kill his new girlfriend because she's actually a monster. The first one, I think her name is Alchemy, and as he's like thanking her for helping them get out of a bad situation, she just like rips her scalp off to expose like all the dead tissue. And like in a later movie, he ends up having sex with this girl at an abandoned hotel. And the next day, he pulls the covers to get a peek, and where her breast should be, it's two of these sentinels that burst out. And
You think you would have noticed that the night before?
yeah, and like in the second one, Mike, he's constantly getting visions of this girl he needs to save. And when they reach this one abandoned funeral home, they think they've cornered the tall man, end up finding what they think is her, and when they get to fully see her body, this like tumor extends out with the tall man's head that just taunts them and tells them where they can go next to face him. So,
so you can fuck with him again, because yeah, by this point, like, we've learned to trust him at his word.
yeah.
So the first real introduction you have of the tall man is after the funeral's over in the original movie. The kid's like lurking around the cemetery, and he sees the tall man bomb up to where his brother's casket is, and he grabs the casket one-handed and just kind of drags it off. And so of course when the kid like tells this to his friend Reggie, is like Reggie being an adult, like he says like is like I was one of the pallbearers. That casket had to weigh like 800 pounds. And yeah, like you take a full grown man and then you take like a wooden casket. Wooden caskets are heavy as fuck because they are solid wood. And so like yeah, 800 pounds sounds about fucking right. And so like it's trying to show that this tall man is like strong as all fuck to be dragging this thing off by himself. One of the things I like that they said that they did with Angus Scrimm was to make him look taller than he actually was, because he's not too terribly taller than like the average person, but to make him look taller, that they gave him the basics, which is platform shoes. That'll add a couple of inches.
Yeah, well, I believe he is 6'2", and then they put platform shoes on him, and they always tried to film him from dramatic angles to make him look even taller.
But another thing that did that I thought was like really cool and is like also kind of funny was that they intentionally like dressed him in clothing that was too small, so that he always looked like he was larger than he was supposed to be, because his clothing was always looked like it was just too short or that he was going to burst out of it at any second. And they did it on purpose, and like, that's kind of funny. Just the idea is like, here, put this on. I don't want it. Put it on. You want to get paid, don't you? It's too small. It rides up in the crotch. I said, put it on. So yeah, the kid goes snooping around the funeral home, and he gets accosted by these funeral attendants who are like under the thrall of the tall man, and of course the titular sentinels show up. It's like most people just know them as like the silver orbs or the silver balls, and they have like this weird noise they make when they're flying at you. In one of the scenes, the kid's being chased, and he hits the ground, and just as he lands flat on his face, you see one of the orbs fly right above him. And I heard when they were filming this that what they actually did is they had like a minor league pitcher, like waited for the kid to fall, and then he hucked a fastball right over his head. It's a good thing the kid fell when he was supposed to, because that thing would have beaten the shit out of him. It's like this guy threw like a 94-mile-per-hour fastball, and that would have just wrecked that kid if that had hit him. That actor would have not been okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there were quite a few things that basically low-budget special effects had
Like
to do.
like jump cuts and shit like that, to like for quick switches and stuff like that. It's a really low budget movie, but it's pretty good for what it is.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of low budget movies that just are not good, and this one does a really good job of making the most out of their budget, making the most out of what they had.
Yeah, for what they do in the movie, they have all the special effects they need. Um, yeah, nothing looks overly fake, except maybe when they do the close-ups of the Sentinels and you can see the background, you can clearly see that it's just sitting in front of a blue screen. But other than that, it's really well done.
So like eventually the tall man unleashes his minions, who are these diminutive little creatures, like these goblin-looking things, and like these big, bulky, like brown robes.
Yeah, they almost look like Jawas. If
Except their eyes
until
don't light up, I don't think.
well, also until you like see the hoods lifted, they wear similar robes to the Jawas, but like underneath it, they're basically the compressed bodies of the people who have been sent to this funeral home. He uses a special kind of embalming fluid to reanimate them, and they're scrunched up because in his own world, the gravity is so intense they actually need to be smaller to function.
Yeah, they end up getting compressed by the high gravity. And so, like, there's a couple of scenes in the first movie that really stand out. One scene in particular, and they use this for like all the commercials and trailers, was like this dream sequence that the main kid, Mike, you said his name was? Mikey?
Yes, Mikey.
Mikey has, like, he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he's in like a cemetery surrounded by fog, and you just see the tall man who's like backlit, like looming over his bed with his hands on like the bedposts, and all of a sudden like two of these like crazy minion things pop out of the ground and start like scratching and dragging the boy off of his bed to drag him underground while he's screaming his fucking head off.
Yeah, that is one thing in this movie series. There are several either dreamlike or hallucinogenic scenes, and they aren't always good about explaining whether it really happened or not. So sometimes it can get a little confusing if you're not paying attention. If you're the kind of person that gets up a lot during the movie, you're going to want to pause this one so that way you don't miss anything and you have a
I mean, like
chance
I
to
think it was
interpret
like the second movie, like one like the kid Mikey says like, "Don't worry, it's just a dream. None of this is real." And all of a sudden, like the tall man shows up. No, it's not, and he just grabs him, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, and then the way the third one starts off, I believe there's a car wreck, and the tall man ends up carrying the girl's severed head over to Mike. Um, yeah, also there are some continuality errors between the sequels. Um,
Well,
so,
the sequels are generally made so far apart. I mean, the first movie came out in '78. The second movie was made 10 fucking years later in '88.
yeah.
When
So,
was the third movie made?
I'm honestly not too sure. Uh, but yeah, they are quite a bit apart. So there can be some,
Yeah, they used the continuity errors.
yeah.
It's
But,
like the movies aren't perfect, but like they're still pretty good. And like I love that Angus Scrim is constantly fucking with this kid Mikey.
yeah.
And like he has this thing where like every so often there'll be a bit where he surprises the kid and he just yells out, "Boy!" Like then generally something comes to like snatch the kid up. It's like as when I saw this as a kid, this movie fucked with me and it fucked with me something awful.
Yeah. Most of my relatives who saw the movies as children, they said it freaked them out quite a bit.
Because it's like it's almost like it's made as a horror movie for kids, but it's not. It's an extremely R-rated movie.
Yeah.
It's like kids should never watch this. But then again, you and me were kids of the '80s, and we watched some pretty heinous shit. As mentioned before, USA Up All Night and Joe Bob Briggs' Monster Vision.
RoboCop.
That
That,
was not a
that,
horror movie, but like the violence easily could have made it one.
that was a hard R, and it was marketed towards kids.
No, it was. I don't think it was marketed towards kids. It's just
It
that
was RoboCop.
I think it came about like later on, like when they realized so many kids watched it, they like tried to. It's like, well, a bunch of kids saw it. Let's fucking sell toys, and so they did.
RoboCop was a giant toy. Parents would not have been interested in that.
Well, the thing is, like they made toys and a cartoon out of like fucking Rambo First Blood,
Yeah.
and like no, it was like Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Yeah, but Rambo wasn't a robot.
No, but he did kill the shit out of people.
Yes, but adults, at least of the 80s, you put childish things away. You don't go to see movies about robots because you wanted to go see movies about robots. Nowadays you do, but...
You gotta admit, though, RoboCop, the whole reason he was a robot was so they could show him getting blasted to fucking pieces by shotguns at point blank range while screaming his fucking head off.
It could have been. But speaking of shotguns, in the second movie, one of the main characters, Reggie,
He gets one of the most badass weapons of horror movie history.
he jury rigs himself together a 4-barrel shotgun, and it is beautiful. And
It's like something you'd see in Duke Nukem.
I want to say it's part 3. There wasn't a reason for this shotgun to actually be in the movie because he throws it down the stairs in part 2 after he fires it off. But after the car crash, it's right there in the street. They knew how important that was. So
you gotta go with what works. I think in the second movie they introduced like multiple Sentinels for the first time, and was it the third movie where they gave like the Sentinels various like utility, or was that the second movie?
In the second movie, you get to see some different weapons. It's actually where you see the first gold orb, and that one it fires lasers in addition to turning into like this drill that burrows through a guy's spine and out of his mouth. And then there's another silver orb. Rather than having the prongs, it has like a rotating blade that extends out and ends up slicing off someone's ear.
Now, I
Uh,
remember there used
uh,
to be like a big laser disc thing, and actually, in like one of the things it came with was like a giant sentinel, like a giant silver orb. I remember there was this pawn shop in town that had it, but I didn't have a laser displayer. I was a kid at the time, and my parents sure as fuck weren't going to get me that thing.
I would love to own a Laserdisc player, but I've never been able to find them under $600.
Or like functioning.
Yeah.
So you can find one under $600, but it ain't gonna fucking do what you need it to.
That's still going to be over 200, just because people want to part them out. But I actually would have to rewatch part 3 to tell you about the orc on that one. What I end up remembering more is there's this trio of thugs that end up getting like zombified at some point and just fucking with Reggie for most of the movie. There's also a lady with nunchucks and a kid who knows more about guns than anybody else in the movie because his parents probably taught him gun safety.
Maybe his parents were like, homeboy from Tremors.
I think
the dude was like the gun nut and had the wall of guns in his basement.
I want to say his father was like a sheriff, but I'm not positive. And then in the fourth one, the tall man carries a green orb around that has a saw blade in it, which he was going to use for surgery, but he ends up getting stopped because of a tuning fork.
Because why not?
Yeah, I don't exactly understand how the tuning forks work in that movie, but for some reason they can stun the tall man. When I get the chance, I'm going to end up just marathoning all 5 of them together. And
because you still haven't seen the 5th one. It's the only one you haven't seen yet, right?
Right, I have not seen Ravager, and I am looking forward to it.
I liked the first movie. I loved the second movie. I thought the third one was a bag of trash. I never bothered with the fourth one.
Oblivion is kind of weird, and the way it ends was pretty confusing to me. So that's part of the reason I want to see Ravager, is to see where they go with it.
And also, it's supposed to be like what Angus Scrimm's last movie.
Yes, it's the final one that he did, and it's probably going to be the final one in the series.
I can't imagine them doing another like Phantasm without Angus Scrimm.
Yeah, there's some horror movies where you can replace your bad guy. This is not one that I think you could replace.
Yeah, Angus Scrimm is like, the tall man isn't a dude wearing a mask. He's not a dude wearing like prosthetic makeup. He doesn't have like a big fucking fake mascot head he's wearing. This isn't Pumpkinhead. This isn't Jason Voorhees where you can just put a fucking mask on some dude's face. This isn't like Freddy Krueger, who I know he's only been replaced like once.
Yeah.
Robert Englund like used to be the role, and then like Homeboy from The Watchmen took it. And even then, like, it was 2 completely different styles of characters. But like, you could still make them look pretty close to the original Freddy Krueger, because you just do the fucking like melted pizza like head.
Yeah.
It's like someone tried to make a pizza out of his head, and they only got it halfway done, and this is what we ended up with.
That was actually how they came up with his makeup. They were trying to decide how to make the Burns look, and at one point they actually had like beads of melted flesh hanging from it, and they decided not to because it kind of looked goofy. When he turned, you'd see him kind of jiggle. And then while they're discussing this, they're eating a pizza, and one of them like starts rearranging the cheese, and that's how they came up with the Freddy makeup.
But like obviously Pumpkinhead, like, it's just a big fucking like.
I believe
prostate.
Pumpkinhead is an animatronic. They might have done some costuming for some of the close-up shots.
But I mean, like Michael Myers.
Yeah, Michael Myers.
With like a full head mask. Is like the tall man is none of this. The tall man is Angus Scrimm. Unless you got the budget to do, and I doubt they'd ever have this budget for any fucking Phantasm movie. Unless you had the budget to do like how they did with Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, like where you just do a full fucking CG head and get someone that can do a really awesome Angus Scrimm voice. There's no way you're going to be able to replace him in that movie.
Yeah. And even then, I would prefer that they wouldn't CG him in. It's not like he has a minor role in those movies. So hopefully Part 5 did a kind of final send-off with the series, because part 4, it ended in a way that you could say it was over. Um, the At one point, Mike gets turned into one of these Sentinels, and Reggie is trying to save him, and the tall man pulls an orb out of Mike's skull, and it seems like he gives up. He just kind of takes the orb, walks off into a portal, and goes away, and then Reggie ends up taking Mike through a portal, and it almost seems like they're going back in time to just try to start over at a peaceful point. I could be misinterpreting that ending, but that's what it seems like to me.
All I know is that the trailer you showed me of like Phantasm 5 showed like Reggie running down the street and falling to his knees as like a giant moon, like a giant Death Star sized fucking sentinel that comes over the horizon.
Yeah, I am wondering if that's like a dream sequence or if there's really going to be an orb that big. And what is it going to do?
You drill a hole in the earth and like pull out like all the magma at the back.
Maybe.
Until the earth pisses itself and dies.
Yeah, now, another thing that's, I do remember about part 3 and part 4, part 1 and 2, they show the orbs in singular units. And 3 and 4, these orbs actually show up in swarms. And the thought of that to me is, like, terrifying. I remember there's one scene, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but Reggie's on the floor and the entire ceiling is covered with these orbs. And,
I mean, like, they're almost impossible to destroy. They're super fucking fast. They're semi-intelligent, so they can home in on you. And, like, just the way they end you is unpleasant at best.
Well, they do actually explain why it seems like they're able to show intelligence, and that's actually because the tall man takes the brains out of those dwarfs and puts them inside the sentinels. So,
I know, like, I think it was in 2, like, one of them, like, slams into a dude's hand and he freaks out and, like, cuts off his fucking hand with a hatchet.
Yeah, because he'd rather do that than deal with the sentinel.
It's like, fuck that.
He doesn't even hesitate. He just starts chopping his arm off. So.
Like, you gotta be really highly fucking motivated to do that. It's like, he knows something we don't.
And he does, in fact, end up dying at the hands of this sentinel. It's
maybe, like, if it gets a taste of you, like, it'll just home in on you regardless of who you are or where you go.
Or, no, it was one of the silver ones that pinned his hand to the wall, and the gold one ends up chasing him down. It, like, lasers through, like, several doors to get to him, and I think it even shows a chase scene with him, like, putting doors between him and the gold orb. And then, like, he gets a metal door in front of it and thinks he's safe, but the thing ends up using its laser to burrow through, and then just grinds through his spine and out his mouth.
Those things are very highly motivated.
Yeah.
Let's see, how do they deal with Angus Scrimm and or not Angus Scrimm, that's the fucking actor. How do they deal with the tall man in the first movie? I forget.
If I'm not remembering correctly, they actually kill him multiple times. I know at one point they hit him with a fire extinguisher, and the cold actually causes him to explode. It's in I believe the second film, they fill an embalming
The second
centrifuge with acid.
And then, like, they stick the embalmer, like, in his neck and hit the thing up to full, and you just see, like this green fluorescent goo, almost reminiscent of, like, the shit from Reanimator.
Yeah.
Like, just start pouring out of, like, his billowing veins as he's screaming.
Yeah, in more than one movie, I believe, he dies more than once, and then you just see him, like, step out of these gateways again. And the impression I get is that he basically can keep coming back from different times. I want to say it's part 4 when they find out the origin of the tall man. They see his past self as Jebediah Morningside go into a gateway.
Because it's the Morningside Funeral Home.
You're right. And then when he comes out as the tall man, uh, he seems fully aware that Mike is there, even though this would technically be the first time the tall man's stepped into the world, and he immediately goes after him. So,
Thing is, like, what you tell me earlier, like he says, like, so what happened? It's like, so mornings, so Jebediah came back, and like someone says, Jebediah never came back.
right, yeah, Mike ends up finding his brother. It turns out his brother was turned into one of these sentinels and can morph from the orb into a human form. Uh, and Mike wants to see how it happened. Jebediah goes through the gate, and he asks when he comes back, and his brother tells him Jebediah Morningside never comes back. And then the tall man comes out with holding one of the orbs.
So, like, we could understand that Jebediah Morning Sun got turned into a fucking Edgar suit that this interdimensional creature is wearing is like a, it's like he's skin rotting this poor bastard.
Possibly. I don't know if they're going to explain more of it in 5 because they never say what happened to him on the other side.
Bad, terrible things, guy.
At the very least. I doubt it was pleasant.
For those of you who aren't familiar, an Edgar suit is a term that it's a term used by other people. I actually got it from, I forget where I got it. It was something off of YouTube, and I just liked the idea so much that like I kept it for myself. An Edgar suit is a reference to the original Men in Black movie. The antagonist in that movie is what they refer to as a bug. And those of you who remember that movie and got the chance to see it, it's like this giant alien roach, but it grabs hold of this farmer guy, eats him, hollows him out, and then essentially hides itself in this farmer's skin. And even his wife says, like, it wasn't like Edgar at all. It was like someone wearing an Edgar suit. And so, like, whenever there's, like, someone wearing the skin of someone else, we generally refer to them as to wearing an Edgar suit.
Yeah. And then also, like, pieces of the tall man that get separated from him seem to become like smaller monsters. In the first film, there's a point where they cut off one of his fingers, and it ends up becoming like some kind of wasp that attacks him. I know in the second film, they cut open his head, and like this worm with gnashing teeth crawls out of it. And I believe there's a few other instances where these small creatures seem to come from his blood.
He's just full of surprises, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's
Also,
like, don't stab him. You don't know what kind of fucking nonsense is going to pour out of him.
yeah.
Bludgeon him. That's the way to go.
Speaking of the nonsense that comes out of him, his blood is this mustardy yellow in color. I don't know if it was supposed to be yellow or like green, but not on the screen it looks yellow. And when I was referring to the part where they cut off his finger, they actually put it in a box because it's still moving around. And it looks like they just kind of cut a hole in the box, put a finger through, and filled it with mustard, so it looks like the blood's leaking out.
Well, like, maybe that's just what they use. It's just got like an industrial tub of mustard to just use as like tall man goo.
They might have, or...
I mean, we've explained that this is a low-budget movie, the first one, and the second one wasn't exactly exploding with money either. None of these movies have been big-budget movies, at least not to my understanding.
No, even the fifth one, they actually had such little budget that they had to get funded elsewhere. And as I understand, I'm not certain the truth of this, but if you've watched Star Wars and you're familiar with the character Captain Phasma.
From the new movies, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi.
Yes. She's actually meant to be kind of a nod to Phantasm, with her silver armor being like the orbs and Phasma Phantasm. From what I understand, J.J. Abrams actually took some of the money he made to help finish funding the fifth film.
If that's the case, then he deserves a lot more props than I've generally given him before in the past.
Yeah, I remember reading an article about this. Don't know like the total truth behind it, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time fact checking. I'm just going to hope that it's true because I like the idea.
It would be nice to think that actors, rather than just like pissing away their money on buying yet another motherfucking island for
Or
themselves,
or dinosaur bones, or
or like two albino cobras. We saw a video where they were recently where they were talking about all the Nick Cage's story, how he had $150 million, pissed it all away, and still owes the IRS $15 million.
personally though, I think him buying dinosaur bones is awesome. And I think all actors and actresses should be legally required to buy at least $1 million worth of dinosaur bones.
But that aside, like just like the list that they gave of like all the shit that Nicolas Cage had pissed away his money on.
Pure awesome insanity.
Well, at least insanity, at the very least. Like rather than like an actor doing that kind of shit with their money, but actually putting it towards like independent projects, stuff like hey, let's make another Phantasm movie, help us out, and like some guy comes along and says, hey, I'm doing a Star Wars movie, I can use some of that money to help you out. It's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Putting some of that Star Wars money to good use.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many islands. There's only so many. You can't just keep buying islands. Eventually you're going to run out of islands.
Maybe you can make an island out of dinosaur bones.
I don't know if like Nicolas Cage would be up for doing that. Imagine if he had like.
If he had the money, he would absolutely be up for doing that.
But God, some of the things of Phantasm. One thing I remember a couple of years back, I said like I liked watching the second Phantasm movie when I saw it on Monster Vision back in the day, and you happened to have it, or you had it at the time on VHS, and this is back when you had a working VHS player. And so we were watching it together, us and a couple of friends, and like there's a bit where there's a funeral for this gentleman who died, and it's this old man, and the priest like apparently knows there's something wrong and that the tall man is coming, so he takes out this big ceremonial dagger and he stabs the old man who's dead at this point already through the heart. And like the old man's widow walks in and sees him and she screams.
He turns around and notices that she's been there long enough to witness the whole ritual of stabbing him through the heart.
And the look that this priest gives when he turns around, just it looks like a drunken, angry glare. Because like his eyes are like kind of uneven and like his lips curled in like a drunken grimace. It's hilarious. It's awesome and it's hilarious. And of course, the sight of this causes the old woman to drop dead of a heart attack.
Well, she doesn't drop dead. She ends up fainting, but
I thought she died because like don't the both of them end up getting like dwarfed?
yes, but actually, what ends up happening is it shows her in bed during a stormy night, and she wakes up because of the lightning, and she's fixed to relax and go back to bed. She turns over, and there's her husband. Kind of decayed, lips stitched up, and the dagger sticking out of his heart right next to her. And then she screams, and you actually see her as a dwarf later. One of the other main characters, I don't remember her name, but she's on the floor at a funeral home, and the dwarf starts saying her name. It's kind of warped. But when she looks up and sees under the dwarf's hood, she's like, Grandma?
Now there's a scene, I think it's in the second movie, where Mikey finds one of the gates that the tall man comes through. And for all intents and purposes, these are two metal pillars sticking out of the ground about, what, 4 feet or 3 feet?
I would say they're probably about 3 feet tall. And they probably stand about 3 feet apart from each other.
So like it's like by themselves they're nothing special. They're just like these two. They look like they're made out of the same silvery metallic material that the Sentinels are made from.
Yeah, they make a similar humming sound.
Yeah, like whenever they start humming, they essentially activate and it creates an interdimensional portal, which I think that has something to do with the fact that like tuning forks screw with the tall man. I think they're trying to signify that there's like something sound oriented with him and the gates. because there's one part where like one of the characters places his hands on the pillars, and when they stop vibrating, the gate disappears.
Yeah, it may not be sound; it might be frequency, but there's it has it seems like there's some sort of correlation.
Yeah, so like maybe that's why Angus Grimm gets disoriented or stunned by the tuning forks, because it's like sound vibrations or like the sound frequency that like screws with them. It could be like if you've read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft, like both of us have. Like some of them talk about like universes outside of our spheres, and there's like H.P. Lovecraft stories and like other stories of that similar style where they talk about like traveling from one dimension to another, not through magic, not through like supersonic energy, but like essentially by creating like a special sound frequency, which tunes into the frequency of another dimension, and you can use that to essentially travel between the veils into another dimension of reality. So perhaps it was like a throwback to one of those stories because H.P. Lovecraft, I didn't even realize how old this shit was. He started writing back in like the 1880s, and he ended up dying in the 1930s. So that dude was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But so like I think there's a scene in the second movie where Mikey, like his head falls down towards the gate, and his head actually goes through the gate, and he looks on the other side. When he does, it's like this giant blowing red desert with this really loud noise in the background, and he sees off in the distance these short, squat, robed individuals, the dwarves, the minions, like and they're like way off in the distance, but they're like kind of walking towards the portal, and you only see it for like a second or two before Mikey gets pulled back, I think by Reggie or something like that.
I believe it's Reggie.
And that's when they find out that like the gravity's super heavy there, and that might explain why like you take an average sized person, they get sent through the portal. When they come out as a dwarf reanimated, they're like squat. They're like the size of a dwarf.
Yeah. Of course, that also makes the tall man an interesting case if he's from that dimension.
Because like either he'd have to be really structurally strong to be able to keep that height. There's like one thing I was suggesting is like, what if he was in his own dimension? He was the size of an average person, like 5'10", 6 foot even, and like, but because he was under high gravity and being compressed, when he comes into like our realm, he stretches out because he's not under that constant stress of the high gravity, which explains why he's so unnaturally tall.
It would certainly explain his strength because, as mentioned, he picks up a coffin by himself. There's a scene where he picks up a girl and chucks her into the ceiling of a mausoleum, which is very tall. She ends up flying at least 10 feet across the room and into the ceiling.
Ah, yes, the old standby. When you want the horror villain to like be a threat, but you can't have him killing the main characters in one hit, you have the bad guy throw them. That's like in every fucking thing. Like you see like a giant monster. What's the first thing they do to the good guy? They throw them across the room. It's like if I was a giant monster in a horror movie, I would just grab them by the head, use my other arm to grab them by the arm, and just pull until either the head comes off or the arm comes off. Something's going to come off.
Oh, they have a movie like that. It's called Pumpkinhead.
But I think at one point he does pick up someone and throw them like that stereotypical way, I'm sure. I've never seen the original Pumpkinhead. I've only ever seen Pumpkinhead 2. That was the only one they used to show on Sci-Fi Channel back in the day.
Well, when I get all four of them, we'll have to marathon it together.
No, we're not marathoning that. I will watch the first one, and that's where I will stop. I'm not going to sit there and watch the second one again, because that one wasn't impressive. I'm not interested in seeing the third and fourth.
I thought you were my friend.
I am, but I have limits. Don't you cry. Men don't cry. Fat men don't cry. No one wants to see a fat man cry. It's very depressing. Stop it. Don't make me get the shoe. I will get the shoe. You don't want me to get the shoe. Anyway, back to Phantasm. So like yeah, the Tall Man definitely like one of the great like villains of like the horror movies like from I consider him an '80s villain. I know the first movie came out in '78, like the end of the '70s. I wouldn't consider Phantasm to be like a '70s genre film. I know they did like several of them in the '90s, but they still have that '80s horror movie vibe in my book.
Yeah, despite like the years apart these movies were produced, they all still feel like they're being done in the same time frame. Um, like the special effects never improve past a point that they feel radically different. Of course, I can only speak up to part four because I still haven't seen Ravager, but I'll be able to say for sure within a day or two.
What was one thing they told me was like the biggest continuity error throughout all the movies was like Reggie's car.
Yeah, Reggie's he has a Himikuda, and like they destroy this car in every movie I've seen. And I'm not talking just like wreck it. I'm talking blow up or like spiral it down a hill and get crushed. And it's
Maybe
always
that's where the majority of their budget goes to, having to buy another fucking Hemi-Cuda for the next movie.
maybe, but yeah, by the next movie it's up running and without a scratch.
It's like maybe that's a running gag. It's like an intentional continuity error.
I would like to think that's true.
Because I know that like some movies become self-aware. I've heard of certain movies, especially movies that run through a series, that when like they're made aware of a continuity error, that sometimes they'll continue
They're
doing
just
it
like, fuck
intentionally.
it.
It's like like it's a fucking joke. Like I remember they did that. Is like it was obviously something they did intentionally, so it wasn't a continuity error that they were like spoofing. But just in South Park, how like every time Kenny would die, by the next episode Kenny was there, and then like one episode where like Kenny dies and he has a brother that's born, they dress him up like Kenny and it's like we'll name him Kenny. It's like wow. It's like I wonder how many times. It's like oh, this seems like we've done this before. And like the mother says, I think at least 52 times already. This was like the fourth or fifth season.
Hey,
And
she's
then, like-
52. Her babies come out sideways and she would scream a bit.
And then like later on, they actually made it into like a different joke when they introduced the Mysterion character, which everyone knows by now is like Kenny is Mysterio. I mean, hell, they even had like this box set over at GameStop I saw. It was like like the Justice Super Friends, like with Cartman, Token, and Kenny, and you can tell it's like Tupperware, the Coon, and Mysterio. So obviously Kenny has to be Mysterio because you can easily see that Tupperware is Token, and of course Cartman is the Coon. But Mysterion is like the only one out of the group that actually has a superpower, and he explains it. It's the ability to always come back when he dies. But the side effect is that no one remembers that he died. And everyone just continues as normal. It's like, oh, hey, Kenny, there you are. We were wondering where you were. Like whenever like he kills himself in one episode intentionally because they get stuck in a different dimension. And he just instantly wakes up like in his bed, like as if he was asleep. And he runs to his closet and grabs another Mysterion costume and runs off to help his friends again.
Well, I've never actually owned any DVD copies of any of these movies. And at least from the back of the box, it looks like there are special featurettes and stuff. So maybe I'll get a chance to learn some of the lore that I've never known about them, and we can solve the mystery of the Himikuda.
Now, that reminds me of something else. Like, you can learn a lot of stuff from listening to the commentary. I saw on the back of these that at least the first two movies, and I think the fourth one, have commentaries from the actors, the creator, and Angus Scrimmage, so the Tall Man.
Yes.
Now, one thing I learned from watching with the commentary on with the Thing was that a lot of crazy shit happened on set over there. The fact that like the special effects guy nearly died from exhaustion working on that movie because he was essentially working a one-man crew, which mostly included himself and no one else. And then the thing that I found interesting was that a lot of the dialogue was actually brought in to voice concerns that the actors had about the plot that the creator did not have answers to. Like one of the famous ones was there's a scene like after uh, they're burying, I think, like the remains, like after they burn up the remnants of like the thing they found on at the base, at the other base, and like their friend that they had to like torch. And like one of the characters, Childs, asks, like, if I was a perfect imitation, I mean a perfect imitation of myself, how would I know if I was a thing? Would I even know? Or he says something to that effect, and like on the creator commentary, they said that that is literally something that the creator put into the movie because that's something the actors kept asking him. They kept asking him, was like, so do the imitations know that they're imitations, or do they think that they're the originals? And the creator was a dick about it and never told him. But he says one of the reasons he never told him is because he never thought that far ahead.
Yeah, the thing, that's definitely a movie we'll have to talk about on
At
different.
length, yeah. But yeah, it's like stuff like that. I'm hoping to hear stuff like that. I'm hoping it's just not them like doing peanut gallery comments because we can do that ourselves.
Yeah, one of the few commentaries I have actually watched was for Freddy versus Jason, and it's a fun commentary, but a lot of it is peanut gallery from Robert Englund and Ronnie Yu just kind of agreeing with the actors. Um, But there were a few fun facts to learn, like when they're coming to scenes that they couldn't do the way they wanted to do, and they were explaining like how they originally wanted to do them. And so I'm hoping there's a lot of that with Phantasm, and maybe give some insights that weren't explained in the movie.
Now, like, it's the thing, like, if we go through it and they say, like, well, we never came out with, like, we never really understood, like, it was like, we never told, like, how the Sentinels move around because we never figured it out ourselves.
I would be okay with an answer like that too. You know, the movie I think is interesting enough and unique enough that I don't need to have every question answered, but I would certainly love to find out more about it.
For what it is like, at least the first two are really good movies for what they are, which is low-budget horror. It's like, because there's a lot of low-budget horror out there. There's a lot of shit out there. There's a lot of like direct to DVD garbage trash piles. Or like it used to be back in the day where they direct to VHS.
Yeah, direct video. It's basically the same thing nowadays. I think it's still called direct to videos or maybe direct DVD, but basically where they skip the theater or have a very limited theatrical release. Most of the Hellraisers have done that nowadays. The last one, Hellraiser Revelations, as I understand, got a very limited theater release, but this new one, Judgment, didn't even get that. Um, Still looking forward to it, and I will order it when it comes out.
The first two Phantasms, if I know that the Alamo Draft House will do like showings of like older movies that you can go watch. I would love to see like the first two Phantasm movies in the theater at the Alamo Draft House.
I would love to see any Phantasm movie at the theater, but yes, the first two are definitely my favorites. Especially part two. That one is definitely more of a theater experience, especially with the crazy weapons and you got that fight scene with the chainsaws. That is definitely something you just like want to be chowing down popcorn and the bad hot dogs too.
One thing I do like about the Alamo Draft House, unlimited refills on your popcorn. It comes in a big, and the thing is, it sells itself. It comes in a big fucking silver bowl, just like the big silver bowls, the orbs. In fact, they could even do it up. Like they could take like they could literally make like
make like
the orbs. Like you just pop it open, and it's like full of popcorn.
Well, I was thinking, make the people working in the theater dressed with the brown robes like the dwarves.
Because they're always having to hunch down so they don't block your view when like they're trying to check the orders and bring you your shit.
Yeah. That would be awesome.
Yeah, there's only one actual dwarf I know of that lives in the area. Can't say his name. Then again, like, you know, the name I know him by is just his nickname, but still. Man,
Well,
I haven't seen him since college. I saw him after college. He used to go to the mud room a lot, which was a local bar around here.
well, I mean, if they really wanted to hire dwarves to do it, it wouldn't be that hard because quite a few of them have like standby acting careers like that. But I think it'd be easier just to take the crew and give them brown robes. But you know, hey, they want to get dwarves for us. All the better. I will buy 2 tickets. One to put my fat ass in, and one to
Put you like your mountain of food.
yeah, my mountain of food.
I want so much popcorn in this bowl that it is tall as me.
The tall corn.
Well, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this one. If you haven't gotten the chance, go ahead and watch at least the first 2. If you can get your hands on this set, it's a 5 DVD set. Walmart's got it for just about $15.
That's $3 a movie.
And like the first 2 are worth a lot more than that. I'd say that the first 2, at the very least, are worth like $10 a piece.
Yeah.
At the very least.
In my opinion, the first 2 alone, you're getting your money's worth out of it. And
Definitely.
And even if you don't like the other movies, I think there's enough interesting things, memorable moments, and laughs you can have.
And for all we know, we may come back to this, talk about it, probably not as much at length. Like, you know, after you and me have seen the final one, or at least after you've seen it, I know you're going to definitely watch it like the first chance you fucking get.
Yeah. Well, I would say like we should probably watch as much commentary as we're willing to in the 5th one if we're ever going to retrace this as a subject.
It's the only thing is it's kind of sad is that Angus Scrimm did die, and that thankfully they were able to finish the movie, but unfortunately they couldn't have him in the commentary tracks because he was dead. I just hope that, like, you know, they didn't drag him through a portal and turn him into a fucking midget version of himself. And then it was like, you know, we're bringing him back as the short man.
I am very grateful that they managed to get this film out before his passing, and even if it's bad, I'm going to be happy to watch it.
Yeah, just like, you know, finish it up, because like I can't think of anything else Angus Scrimm was in. I know Angus Scrimm isn't even his actual name; it was like his stage name, like, or his acting name. You know, like, you know, a lot of actors have like fucking phony ass names because their real names are total bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, like, what was it, Leonardo DiCaprio? I don't think that's his actual name. I think his real name's like Leonard Lord Fauntleroy or something like that. Some bullshit. You never know. It's like I've heard of a lot of actors that just have like the most bullshit, stupid names you've ever heard. And so like they have to go with like, you know, like really fancy names. Otherwise they'd be laughed off the fucking stage. But that aside, we're gonna enjoy these. We hope you guys give them a try. If you've seen the Phantasm movies, definitely comment on what you think your favorite thing is, what you think they could have done to improve it. If you were to make your own Phantasm movie, how would you do it? Just anything Phantasm related, or just any constructive comments, definitely put them in the comment sections. And of course, as usual, like, comment, subscribe, share. We need as many fans as we can get. We're just starting out, so it's like still we're actually recording all of these before we even post the first one. So we're just getting them out there so we can appreciate any help you guys can give. But in the meantime, stay angry. If you're fat, stay fat. And keep listening. And we'll talk to you guys later.
Eat donuts.